Rex, Rex, listen to me. Arnz dropped everything and ran after him. But Rex had already sat in his car. His keys were on the dashboard and his hands gripped the wheel tightly. Arnz knew that look. He had seen that same expression countless times. He tried to ignore it, but he couldn't. This wasn't like when they met in jail. This was different. Please, Arnz begged with a sigh. Don't do this. He tried his best to grab the other's hands from where they gripped the car wheel. It didn't work. Arnz had to step back and sit inside the car before he gave up. This was so selfish of you. He trailed off. The silence in the air felt more oppressive than it ever had during the day when everyone was talking around them. The sounds of people running and screaming could still be heard. And no one cared how loud their cars were. They were just driving away like they always did. Soon they arrived at the scene. Rex parked the car a short distance away and walked toward the back of the house, where the family name, Larson family, was displayed on the back door of the mansion. It looked old, like something Victorian or even older. There was a small garden and fountain with benches by the edge of the house, and a wooden bench facing the street where people gathered to chat with each other while enjoying the cool autumn wind. Why was this nameplate on the back of the house? Rex thought. Why are you here now? Arnz asked, noticing the back door. If you knew that much, you wouldn't be in the police today, but a detective like me? Well, Detective Rex Adam, as you say. Arnz folded his hands and bowed his head. When he didn't get an answer, he looked up and found that Rex was no longer there. Here, Rex waved his hand. Arnz saw that he was standing on the wall. He also leaped over the wall and entered the house just like Rex. He gazed at the door, noticing there was no lock, and felt a surge of anger toward Rex. You knew the door was open, Arnz called out to Rex from behind. Yes, I knew, but I was making you practice how to escape in case we got caught. Get caught? You know Rex started before Arnz interrupted. Yeah, I know you're a police officer. Now, come on. Rex walked further but stopped, standing with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on something beyond the fence. Arnz joined him, both peering into the backyard, which seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. No matter where he looked, he could only see trees that stretched out forever, until he couldn't distinguish between the branches and leaves, or between the grass and dirt. It seemed like there was something wrong with it. As if a layer of dust covered every surface, covering his eyes and ears, making the sound of rustling trees deafeningly clear and painful. He glanced down to see the soil under his feet turning into mud, making his shoes stick with every step he took. Upon arriving at the crime scene, Rex carefully took stock of every detail. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Furniture overturned, shards of glass scattered across the floor, and the faint scent of something burning lingering in the air. His sharp eyes scanned the room, piecing together what had happened. As he moved through the house, he mentally reconstructed the sequence of events. His investigation led him to the child's room, a small, dimly lit space that seemed strangely frozen in time. The bed was unmade, toys scattered across the floor, and a feeling of abandonment hung in the air. On the wall, in bold, hurried letters, was Raya's name, written in a panic. The sight of it sent a chill down Rex's spine, and he lingered for a moment, running his fingers over the rough, uneven markings. Something about the way the name was written felt wrong, and he knew this detail was significant, perhaps the key to unlocking the mystery. Rex crouched down, sitting on his feet as he leaned in closer, his eyes fixed intently on the wall. The name Raya was boldly written, but there was something strange about it. Just beside it, barely visible, was another word, unfinished. It seemed as if the person who wrote it had been interrupted or deliberately left it incomplete. The faint marks were so light, almost a whisper of ink, that even the camera couldn't capture them clearly. Rex's fingers hovered near the faint trace, his mind racing. Whatever that word was, it felt like a clue, one that had been deliberately obscured. He knew it was important, but what did it mean? The house had been sealed off for 2 weeks, and a thick layer of dust had settled over everything. The once pristine surfaces now had a dull, neglected look, as if time had stood still inside the walls. But amidst the stillness, something stood out. Fresh footprints, clearly made by someone recently. The marks were sharp and distinct, cutting through the thick layer of dust, indicating someone had entered the house not long ago. Rex studied the footprints closely, noticing their direction and depth. Whoever had left them was either in a hurry or deliberately trying to avoid detection. But the footprints were a clear sign that the scene was far from untouched. "SH." Rex's voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough to freeze Arnz in place. He held up a hand, signaling for silence, his eyes scanning the dimly lit room. "There's someone else here besides us," Rex murmured, his gaze fixed on the shadowy corners of the house. Who could it be? Arnz whispered back, his voice tinged with confusion and curiosity. Without a word, Arnz slowly drew his gun, the cold steel gleaming in the dim light. He moved cautiously toward the door, slipping behind it, his back pressed against the wall. Rex followed suit, his instincts sharp, every sense heightened. A chilling silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint sound of footsteps. Then, out of the shadows, a figure began to materialize. At first, it was just a shape, growing larger with each passing second. The sound of soft footsteps grew louder, the figure moving cautiously, as if aware of something or someone nearby. It was coming toward them. Rex's heart pounded in his chest as he peered through the crack of the door, eyes narrowing. He saw her, a girl perhaps in her 20s, moving cautiously through the house. Her features were unclear, hidden in the low light, but there was something unsettling about her presence. Before Arnz could react, Rex was already in motion. He stepped out from behind the door and, with lightning speed, grabbed the girl from behind, his hand firmly clasping her throat. She struggled for a moment, but Rex applied enough pressure to knock her unconscious, her body going limp in his arms. "What the hell?" Arnz muttered, stepping cautiously from behind the door, his gun still aimed at the girl. "Who could she be?" he asked, frowning in confusion. Rex, with a smirk, leaned down to inspect the unconscious girl. "Your so-called Raya. She may have come to erase the evidence." Arnz's eyes widened. "Raya? You think she's the one who—" "Could be," Rex interrupted, a knowing look in his eyes. "Or maybe she's trying to clean up her mess." Arnz knelt beside her, checking for any sign of life. "She'll tell us what she's doing here," he said with determination, though his voice held a trace of uncertainty. "We just need to wait until she wakes up." He carefully lifted the girl into his arms, carrying her with surprising ease despite her limp form. Together, they moved swiftly out of the house, the mystery of her presence hanging over them like a thick fog. As they reached the car, Rex glanced at Arnz, who was still looking down at the girl. "Let's see what she knows," Rex said grimly. "And if she's connected to all this, she won't be able to lie her way out of it." Arnz opened the car door and gently placed the girl in the back seat. As he closed the door with a soft thud, he looked at Rex. "She's the key, isn't she? All this time, she might have been the one pulling the strings." Rex nodded, his eyes cold and calculating. "Let's find out what she knows." Half an hour later, the girl slowly began to stir. Her head throbbed and her vision was blurry at first. She blinked several times, trying to clear the fog in her mind, only to realize something was wrong. She couldn't move. A sharp, uncomfortable pressure on her wrists and ankles jolted her fully awake. Panic surged through her as she realized both her hands were tightly bound behind her back, and her feet were also restrained. She was sitting in the room, the dim light of the interior casting shadows across her face. Her heart raced as she tried to process what had happened. The last thing she remembered was being in the house, but everything after that was a blur. She tried to twist her arms, but the ropes held firm. She looked around, desperate for answers, but the room was unfamiliar, cold, sterile, and silent, except for the muffled sounds of distant footsteps echoing through the hallway. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy as if she were trapped in some sort of haze. The sterile white walls, the metallic scent in the air, it all felt wrong. Am I kidnapped? The first thought that came to her mind as she glanced around the room was confusion. The space didn't have the typical signs of a kidnapping scene. No chaos, no signs of forced entry. Instead, it looked like an ordinary bedroom. The soft, muted light filtered in through the window, casting a calm glow over the space. A bed was positioned against one wall, neatly made but with an air of disuse, as if it hadn't been slept in for a while. On the opposite side of the room, there were two chairs, one with a coat draped over it and a small dressing table with a mirror. Everything seemed to belong to someone, personal, almost intimate, like a room that had been lived in. It didn't feel like a place where someone would be forcibly taken. The sight only deepened her confusion, making her wonder who she was truly dealing with and why she had been brought here. What are they going to do with me? As the realization settled in, a wave of anxiety washed over her. The room, so normal, so personal, contradicted everything she had feared. Her mind raced, and the unfamiliarity of the situation made her pulse quicken. Panic set in as she realized the gravity of her predicament. She couldn't just sit there, trapped in uncertainty. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she quickly began to twist and pull at the ropes binding her hands behind her back. The rough fibers scraped against her skin as she struggled, her breath shallow and frantic. Each movement seemed to make the knots tighter, but the desperation in her eyes only grew. She had to free herself to understand what was happening, why she was here and who was behind this. I will see him when my hands are open. How dare he kidnap me? Me the Xiaobai. Doesn't he know yet I'm a black belt in martial arts? I will dust him in one fell swoop.